For 3 years, Charles thought his wife Michelle's family gatherings were just awkward. The forced smiles, the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms, the way her mother would grip Michelle's hand a little too tightly whenever he spoke. He told himself it was normal in-law tension, that time would smooth everything over. But during what was supposed to be a casual Sunday lunch at her parents' house, Charles received a text from an unknown number while passing the mashed potatoes. And in the 60 seconds it took him to read those 3 screenshots, he realized he hadn't been sitting at uncomfortable family dinners for 3 years. He'd been sitting at carefully orchestrated performances where everyone knew the truth except him. And the role they'd cast him in was so devastating that when he looked up from his phone and saw all their faces frozen mid-conversation, watching him, waiting, he understood that this moment had been coming since the day he said, "I do." The truth in his hand wasn't just going to change his marriage, it was going to detonate it. But before we continue with this beautiful story, please kindly subscribe to this channel and comment where you are watching from. And also share below, what life or relationship challenge are you facing right now? Or what someone you know is going through? Don't forget to like this video as well. All these mean a lot to us. The message came at exactly 1:14 p.m. Charles would remember that detail later, how precisely he could mark the moment his life split into before and after. The phone buzzed in his pocket just as Michelle's father, Richard, was telling some long story about his golf game, and Michelle was laughing at all the right moments, touching Charles's arm the way she did when she wanted him to feel included. He'd almost ignored it, almost let the moment stay perfect. The number had a local area code, nothing more, no name, just those 3 images loading slowly on his screen beneath the table. The first screenshot was a text conversation. He recognized Michelle's number immediately, but the name at the top made his throat close. Daniel, her ex-boyfriend from college, the one she dated for 4 years before they broke up 6 months before she met Charles. The one she said she hadn't spoken to in over a decade. The messages were dated from 2 weeks ago. Daniel, can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible. Michelle, I know, I feel terrible, but I can't stay away from you. Daniel, does he suspect anything? Michelle, Charles? No, he trusts me completely. It's almost sad how much. Charles's hand tightened around the phone. The mashed potatoes sat cooling on his plate. Someone was asking him a question, but the words came through water, distorted and meaningless. He swiped to the second screenshot. This one was worse, much worse. It was a photo clearly taken in a hotel room. Michelle was laughing, wearing nothing but a bedsheet, her hair messy in that specific way that told a story Charles's brain didn't want to process. In the corner of the mirror behind her, you could see part of a man's bare shoulder. The date stamp read, 9 days ago, Thursday afternoon, the day Michelle said she'd worked late on a presentation. The third screenshot was the knife twist. Another message, this one from just yesterday. Michelle, I'm dreading Sunday lunch, having to pretend everything's normal while sitting next to him, while knowing what we did just hours before. Daniel, your family knows about us, right? Must be torture for them to watch you play house. Michelle, Mom and Dad know everything, Sarah too. They've been covering for me since the beginning. Dad almost slipped last month and called you my boyfriend in front of Charles. We all had to laugh it off. Sarah, Michelle's sister, who was sitting right across from Charles at that very moment, smiling at something her husband was saying, who'd had coffee with Charles just last week and listened to him talk about anniversary gift ideas for Michelle. Charles looked up slowly. His vision had gone sharp and clear, the way it does in moments of perfect, terrible clarity. Everyone was still talking, still moving, but now he could see it. The performance. Michelle's mother wasn't meeting his eyes. Her father's laugh was too loud, too forced. Sarah kept glancing at Michelle like she was checking in, making sure something was holding. And Michelle, God, Michelle, she was touching his arm again, leaning into him, playing the devoted wife so convincingly that if he hadn't been holding proof of her betrayal in his hand, he might never have known. How long had they all been doing this? How many dinners? How many holidays? How many times had he hugged her mother goodbye while she smiled and knew, while they all knew, that her daughter was sleeping with another man? His phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. I thought you deserved to know. She's been seeing him for 8 months. Your wife's family has been helping her hide it. I'm sorry, a friend who couldn't watch this anymore. 8 months. Charles did the math automatically, the way your brain works even when it's breaking. 8 months ago was March, right after Michelle's college reunion. She'd come home from that weekend glowing, happier than he'd seen her in months. She'd initiated sex that night with an intensity that surprised him, that made him think maybe they were getting back to how things used to be. He'd taken it as a good sign, as reconnection. The whole time she just reconnected with Daniel. Charles, honey, you okay? Michelle's voice cut through. She was looking at him now with practiced concern, her hand on his shoulder. You look pale. Everyone at the table turned to look at him. 8 pairs of eyes, all of them knowing, all of them watching to see if the performance would hold. If you're enjoying this story so far, pause and comment, I am enjoying this story, below. He could do several things. He could stand up and flip the table, scream, throw the phone with its damning evidence in Michelle's face. He could walk out without a word. He could break down. But Charles had always been good in a crisis, had always been the calm one, the problem solver. So instead he did something none of them expected. He smiled, set his phone face down on the table, cut into his pot roast like nothing had changed. I'm fine, he said evenly. Just remembered something from work. Nothing important. But he watched Michelle's face as he said it. Watched the micro expression of relief flicker across her features before she squeezed his shoulder and turned back to her father's story. He watched Sarah exhale quietly across the table. Watched Richard and Margaret exchange that quick glance that said, good, he doesn't know. We're safe for another week. And Charles decided something in that moment. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of an immediate explosion. He wasn't going to let them see him break. If they wanted a performance, he'd give them one better than anything they'd managed. He'd sit through this entire lunch. He'd smile and nod and compliment the food. He'd hold Michelle's hand during dessert. And then he'd go home and plan his next move with the cold precision they'd all denied him by turning his marriage into their little secret. The lunch lasted another 90 minutes, Charles counted. He participated in conversations about Sarah's kids, about Richard's retirement plans, about the new restaurant that opened downtown. He asked Margaret for her peach cobbler recipe. He laughed at family jokes, complimented the wine, offered to help clear dishes. He was charming. He was perfect. And the whole time he watched them relax, watched Michelle's touches become more confident, more genuine seeming. Watched her family lean back into their chairs, their guard dropping bit by bit as they decided the crisis had passed. That whatever had made him pale earlier was nothing to worry about. In the car ride home, Michelle was chattier than usual. That went well, I thought. Mom really seems to be warming up to you. She reached over and squeezed his hand on the steering wheel. I'm glad you're trying so hard with my family. I know they can be difficult. Charles kept his eyes on the road, kept his breathing even. They're important to you, so they're important to me. It wasn't until they were home, until Michelle had kicked off her shoes and headed upstairs to change, that Charles allowed himself to look at his phone again, to reread the messages, to study Michelle's face in that hotel room photo, to let the reality fully settle into his bones. His wife was having an affair. Her entire family knew. They'd all been lying to his face for 8 months. Every dinner, every holiday, every family photo where they'd posed with their arms around him, smiling like he was one of them. It had all been a lie. Charles sat on the couch in their living room, the room they'd painted together 2 summers ago, where they'd hosted friends and celebrated birthdays and built what he thought was a life. He looked at their wedding photo on the mantel. Michelle in her white dress, radiant, him beside her, proud. Her parents in the background, beaming. Now he wondered if they'd known even then. If Daniel had been in the picture somehow, waiting in the wings. His phone buzzed. He almost didn't look, but something made him check. The unknown number. There's more. Check your home office. The lockbox in her desk. Code is your anniversary. Backwards. Charles's heart kicked against his ribs. He glanced up at the ceiling, could hear Michelle moving around in the bedroom above him. Their anniversary backwards. October 15th, 1015. Reversed. 5101. He stood and walked to the small office they shared, the room where Michelle worked from home twice a week. Her desk was neat as always, organized the way she organized everything in her life, including, apparently, her affair. The lockbox was small, tucked in the back of her bottom drawer under some old files. Charles had never paid attention to it before, assumed it was just documents, important papers. His hands shook as he entered the code. 5101. The box clicked open. Inside was a phone, an iPhone he'd never seen before. A burner, he realized. His stomach dropped further. This wasn't some passionate mistake. This was premeditated, organized, a whole separate device to keep the affair compartmentalized. He powered it on. No passcode. Why would there be? This was her secret phone in her secret box, in the home she shared with her husband, who trusted her completely. It's almost sad how much she'd texted Daniel. Those words echoed in Charles's head. The phone came to life. He opened the messages. There was only one thread. Daniel. Hundreds of messages going back 8 months, exactly like the unknown sender had said. Charles scrolled, his nausea building with each exchange. March 18. Seeing you this weekend reminded me what I've been missing. Charles is a good guy, but he's not you. He'll never be you. April 3. Told Charles I'm having dinner with Sarah. Meet me at the Marriott at 7. May 22nd. We need to be more careful. I thought I saw someone from his work at the restaurant last week. June 10. I think I'm in love with you again. Maybe I never stopped. This is so complicated. July 15. Mom asked me today if I'm going to leave Charles. I told her I don't know yet. I like our life, our house, the stability, but I need you too. Is it terrible that I want both? August 30. Charles wants to start trying for a baby. I told him I'm not ready yet. How can I bring a child into this mess? But I also can't tell him the truth. Not yet. Dad says I need to make a choice soon. Charles had to sit down. The office chair creaked under him. A baby. He'd brought it up last month, excited about starting the next chapter. She'd seemed hesitant and he'd backed off, told her they had time, no pressure. She'd smiled and kissed him and said she loved how patient he was. What she'd meant was she loved how convenient he was. A stable home, a good income, someone who trusted her completely while she figured out who she actually wanted to be with. He scrolled further, found photos, dozens of them, hotel rooms, weekend trips she'd taken with Sarah that weren't with Sarah at all. There was Michelle and Daniel at a beach somewhere, his arm around her, both of them laughing at something off camera. Michelle had told Charles that was a girls' spa weekend. He'd even paid for half of it as a gift. There was a video. Charles's finger hovered over it. He didn't want to watch, but he needed to know the full extent of what he was dealing with. He needed to see exactly who his wife was when she thought he wasn't looking. He pressed play. It was Michelle and Daniel in bed together, clearly after sex, both of them talking quietly. Charles turned up the volume, grateful that Michelle was still upstairs, that he could hear this betrayal in private. Do you think you'll ever tell him? Daniel's voice, lazy and satisfied. Michelle's laugh. About us? God, I don't know. Sometimes I think about it, just coming clean. But then I think about everything I'd lose. The house, the life we've built. His family adores me. My family likes him. It's comfortable. But you're not in love with him. A pause. Charles held his breath. I care about Charles. I do. He's good to me. But no, I'm not in love with him. I don't think I ever was, not really. He was safe after you and I needed safe. And then it became my life and I got used to it. So I'm just the exciting side piece while you play house with the safe guy? Daniel didn't sound hurt, just curious. Don't say it like that. You know it's more complicated. If I left Charles, I'd have to explain it to everyone. Deal with the divorce, the gossip, splitting everything up. And for what? To be with you again? How do I know you won't break my heart the way you did in college? So you're keeping him as a backup plan. That's not, Michelle sighed. Maybe, I don't know. Is that so terrible? He gets a wife, I get stability, and you and I get to have this. Everyone wins, except nobody knows they're not winning everything. Charles stopped the video, heard Michelle's footsteps on the stairs. He powered off the phone, closed the lockbox, shoved it back in the drawer with hands that barely functioned. He was standing by the bookshelf, staring at nothing, when Michelle appeared in the doorway wearing yoga pants and one of his old college sweatshirts. She looked soft and comfortable, like she always did on Sunday afternoons, like someone you'd want to build a life with. What are you doing in here? She asked, smiling. Charles turned to look at his wife, really look at her. Tried to see the woman from the video in the person standing in front of him. They were the same person, but his brain couldn't reconcile it. This was Michelle, his Michelle, who made him coffee every morning, who left little notes in his lunch, who cried at sad movies curled up against his chest, who'd stood in front of their friends and family and promised to love him, honor him, forsake all others. Just thinking about work, he said. The lie came easily now. He was learning. On a Sunday? She walked over, wrapped her arms around his waist, looked up at him with those eyes he'd trusted completely. Come on, let's watch a movie or something. Relax together. Together. Charles almost laughed. Instead, he kissed her forehead, smelled her shampoo, felt her warmth against him, and wondered how she could stand there and touch him like this just hours after texting another man about how sad it was that her husband trusted her. Sounds perfect, he said, and they walked to the living room hand in hand, and Michelle picked a romantic comedy, and she cuddled against him on the couch, and Charles held her and stared at the television without seeing it, his mind racing through possibilities, through plans, through the careful steps of what comes next when you discover your entire marriage is a performance, and you're the only one who didn't get the script. The thing about discovering your wife's affair through anonymous text messages is that you have no one to tell. Charles couldn't call his parents, couldn't talk to his best friend Jake, couldn't reach out to his brother, because the moment he spoke it out loud to someone who cared about him, it would become real in a way he wasn't ready to face yet. So Monday morning, Charles went to work like always. Tuesday too. Wednesday. He kissed Michelle goodbye each morning, asked about her day each evening, made love to her Thursday night because she initiated, and he needed to maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. And every moment he was gathering evidence, making plans, preparing for a conversation that would end everything. The unknown number had texted him twice more, once with login information for Michelle's cloud storage that Charles didn't even know she had. That's where he found everything. Calendar entries for hotel reservations marked as client meetings. Evaluated emails she'd archived rather than permanently erased. Photos automatically backed up from the burner phone. 8 months of documentation of his wife's double life, organized and saved like she was keeping records for tax purposes. The second text came Thursday afternoon. Her family is having dinner Friday night at Richard's club. Daniel will be there. Thought you should know. So that's what this was building toward. Some kind of reveal, some confrontation the anonymous sender was orchestrating. Charles still didn't know who was texting him or why. A guilty conscience from Michelle's family? Someone else Daniel was involved with? An enemy Michelle had made? It didn't matter. What mattered was that Charles now had a choice. He could ignore it, continue gathering evidence for a divorce attorney, or he could go to that dinner and finally stop performing. Friday evening, Michelle was getting ready for what she'd told Charles was a work dinner with a client. She'd been chatty about it all week, this big account she was trying to land, how she might not be home until late. Charles watched her apply makeup in their bathroom mirror, saw her choose a dress that was just slightly too nice for a client dinner. Red, Daniel's favorite color, he'd learned from their messages. "You look beautiful," Charles said from the doorway. Michelle met his eyes in the mirror, smiled that smile that used to make his heart skip. "Thank you, baby. Wish me luck?" "Good luck." He walked up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, kissed her neck, felt her soften against him. "I love you." "I love you too." She turned in his arms, kissed him properly, and Charles knew she didn't mean it. Not the way he did. Not the way he'd meant it every single time he'd said those words to her over 3 years of marriage. He let her go, watched her drive away. Then he got in his own car and followed her, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice. The unknown sender had given him the address, Richard's Country Club on the north side of town, the kind of place with a jacket requirement and valet parking and private dining rooms where people like Michelle's family could entertain without being seen by whoever they didn't want seeing them. Charles had never been invited to Richard's Club. In 3 years of marriage, through countless family dinners and holidays, this exclusive part of Michelle's family life had remained closed to him. He'd asked once, early on, if he could join Richard for a round of golf there. Michelle had laughed and said her dad preferred to keep his club time separate, that it wasn't personal. Now he understood. It was very personal. He parked 3 blocks away and walked. The evening was cool, early November turning sharp. He'd worn his best suit, the navy one Michelle had helped him pick out for her cousin's wedding last year. If he was going to crash a family dinner, he was going to look the part. The club was exactly what he expected. All dark wood and leather chairs and oil paintings of old white men. The hostess at the front desk gave him a polite smile. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting the Porter family, Richard Porter's party." Recognition flickered across her face. "Of course. They're in the Astor room. Right this way." She led him through the main dining area, past tables of people eating expensive food and conducting expensive conversations. The Astor room was in the back, down a hallway lined with photos of club presidents and championship golf trophies. The hostess stopped at a closed door. Through it, Charles could hear laughter, Michelle's laugh, and a man's voice he didn't recognize, probably Daniel's, saying something that made everyone chuckle. "Here we are, sir." "Thank you." Charles waited until she walked away. Then he stood there, his hand on the door handle, and let himself feel it all. The anger, the betrayal, the grief for the marriage he thought he had. 3 years. Not as long as some marriages, but long enough to build a life, to make plans, to believe in someone completely. Michelle had taken that belief and turned it into a joke, something to laugh about with her ex-boyfriend, while her family smiled and enabled it all. If you're enjoying this story so far, pause and comment, "I am enjoying this story," below. Charles pushed open the door. The room went silent instantly. 8 people sat around a private dining table. Richard at the head, Margaret beside him, Sarah and her husband David, Michelle's brother Thomas and his wife Jennifer, and Michelle in that red dress, sitting next to a man Charles had never met in person, but whose face he'd studied in dozens of photos over the past week. Daniel, handsome in that casual way some men are, wearing his wealth and confidence like a second skin. His hand was on Michelle's knee under the table. Charles could see it there, possessive and comfortable. Michelle's face drained of color. "Charles, what are you doing here?" "Hello, honey." Charles stepped into the room, closed the door behind him, let the silence stretch out. Watch them all look at each other, that family communication system kicking into gear, everyone trying to figure out the play. "I thought I'd join you for dinner. I know how much family means to you." Richard cleared his throat, starting to stand. Charles, this is actually a private family gathering. Perhaps we could— Sit down, Richard. Charles's voice came out colder than he'd known he could make it. Richard sat. I think we're past the point of pretending, don't you? Daniel's hand disappeared from Michelle's knee. He leaned back in his chair, assessing Charles with cool interest. This was a man used to getting what he wanted, Charles realized. Michelle wasn't his first affair with someone else's wife. Probably wouldn't be his last. Charles, please. Michelle's voice shook. Can we talk about this outside? Why? Everyone here knows, Michelle. Your whole family has known for 8 months that you're sleeping with your college boyfriend, while I go to work every day thinking I have a wife who loves me. He walked to the table, pulled out the empty chair next to Margaret, sat down like he'd been invited all along. So let's stop pretending. Let's have an honest family dinner for once. Margaret's hand fluttered to her throat. This is inappropriate, Charles. You need to leave. What's inappropriate is what all of you have done to me. Charles looked at each of them in turn. Sarah, you had coffee with me last week. Let me tell you all about the anniversary gift I was planning for your sister. Did you think that was funny? Did you go home and tell your husband about the clueless guy buying jewelry for a wife who's in love with someone else? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Charles, I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you, but what? Family loyalty? He turned to Richard. And you. You almost called Daniel her boyfriend last month in front of me, Michelle said. Must have been hard, keeping track of all the lies, making sure you didn't slip up and ruin the performance. Richard's jaw tightened. Now you listen here. No, you listen. Charles's voice didn't rise, but everyone heard him. For 8 months, you've all sat across from me at dinners, thanked me for hosting holidays, smiled in family photos. And the entire time, you knew my wife was cheating on me. You helped her do it, covered for her, made me feel like I was crazy for thinking something was off. He pulled out his phone, set it on the table, opened the photos from Michelle's burner phone, started scrolling through them where everyone could see. Hotel rooms, beach weekends, Daniel and Michelle tangled in bedsheets. Michelle's face was scarlet now, tears streaming down her cheeks. Please stop, she whispered. Why? You weren't concerned about humiliating me every time you texted him about how sad it is that I trust you, about how I'm just the safe backup plan while you keep the exciting guy on the side. He found the video, the one where she'd explained so clearly that she'd never really loved him. Want to watch this one together? As a family? You all seem to enjoy watching me be played for a fool. That's enough, Daniel spoke for the first time, his voice calm and authoritative, like he had any right to authority in this situation. You've made your point. Michelle made a mistake, but barging in here and attacking her family— Charles laughed. Actually laughed. Her family? These people who helped my wife lie to me for 8 months? Tell me, Daniel, did you know she's married when you started sleeping with her? Or was that part of the appeal? Daniel's expression didn't change. Michelle and I have history. We never really got closure after college. When we reconnected at her reunion, things just happened. Things just happened. Charles repeated it slowly. 8 months of hotel rooms and secret phones and lying to my face just happened. Got it. He turned back to Michelle. When were you going to tell me? Or were you planning to just keep both of us indefinitely? Nice, stable husband at home, exciting lover on the side, family who covers for you. Pretty good setup. Michelle was crying harder now, but Charles felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her. The woman crying at this table was a stranger. His wife, the one he'd thought he knew, had never existed. I'm sorry, Michelle managed. I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Every single day for 8 months you hurt me. Every time you kissed me goodbye to go meet him. Every time you made love to me after being with him. Every time you sat at a family dinner with your parents and siblings and let them all help you lie to my face. He stood up, looked down at all of them. I want a divorce. I've already contacted an attorney. You'll be served papers Monday morning. Charles, wait! Michelle reached for him, but he stepped back. I spent this week documenting everything. The messages, the photos, the videos, the hotel charges on credit cards in your name that you told me were for client dinners. The expenses you claim for business trips that were actually romantic weekends with Daniel. I even have the calendar you kept in your cloud storage with all your affair appointments marked as meetings. He pulled a folder from inside his jacket, tossed it on the table. My attorney has copies of everything. So does your HR department, Michelle, since you are using company resources to conduct your affair. They'll be conducting their own investigation into your expense reports. Michelle's face went white. You didn't. I did. You wanted to keep your comfortable life, your stable job? That's gone now. You committed expense fraud to facilitate an affair. Your company takes that seriously. He turned to Richard and Margaret. As for you two, you knew about all of this and said nothing. Did you think that was love? Helping your daughter destroy her marriage? Letting her use a good man as a safety net while she figured out her feelings? Margaret was crying now too. We thought she'd work it out, that she'd choose. We never wanted it to go on this long. But you let it. You all let it. Charles picked up his phone, pocketed it. I came here tonight because I needed you all to see me walk in with my head high. To know that I'm not the fool Michelle thought I was. That I figured it out and I'm not going to quietly disappear and let you all feel good about yourselves. He walked to the door, then paused, turned back one last time. Daniel was whispering something to Michelle, his arm around her shoulders now that there was no need to hide. Richard and Margaret looked 10 years older than they had 10 minutes ago. Sarah was openly sobbing. Thomas and Jennifer just looked uncomfortable, probably wishing they'd skipped this particular family dinner. Michelle, Charles said quietly, for what it's worth, I really did love you. I would have done anything for you, built any life you wanted, been any version of myself you needed. But I deserved honesty. I deserved a partner who respected me enough to tell me the truth, even if it hurt. You took that choice away from me. You all did. I hope whatever this was worth to you, it was worth destroying what we had. Because we did have something real, at least on my end. I'll never know if you felt anything genuine for me at all. Michelle's voice broke. I did love you. I do love you. No, you don't. If you did, you would have done so many things differently. He opened the door. I'll be moved out of the house by tomorrow. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. My attorney will contact yours about dividing assets. Goodbye, Michelle. I hope you and Daniel are very happy together. He walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Could hear Michelle's sobs echoing in the hallway. Could hear Richard's raised voice, probably berating her now that the truth was out. Could hear the chaos of a family dinner that would be dissected and discussed for years, the night Charles finally learned the truth and burned it all down. Outside, the November air hit his face like a blessing. Charles walked the 3 blocks to his car, got in, and sat in the darkness. His hands shook on the steering wheel. His breath came in gasps. The adrenaline that had carried him through that confrontation was draining away, leaving just the raw pain underneath. His phone rang. Michelle. He sent it to voicemail. She called again. And again. Then texts started coming in. A flood of apologies and explanations and pleas to talk. Charles turned off his phone, started the car, drove to the hotel where he'd booked a room for the weekend, a small place on the other side of town where Michelle wouldn't find him. In the anonymous hotel room, Charles finally let himself break. Cried for the first time since reading those initial texts. Cried for the marriage he'd lost, for the trust that had been shattered, for 3 years of his life built on a foundation of lies, for the future he'd imagined with Michelle, the children they might have had, the life they would have grown old living together. His phone, back on now, buzzed with a final text from the unknown number. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you deserved to know. You deserved better than what she was giving you. Good luck, Charles. You're going to be okay. Charles stared at the message, wondered again who had sent it. Someone who cared about him? Someone who wanted to hurt Michelle? Someone with their own agenda he'd been caught up in? It didn't matter. The information had been true. The betrayal was real. Whatever the sender's motivation, they'd done him a favor, even if it felt like being torn apart right now. 3 months later, Charles sat in his attorney's office, watching Michelle sign the divorce papers. She'd lost weight, looked older somehow. The affair with Daniel had lasted exactly 5 weeks after Charles left her. Apparently, without the thrill of sneaking around and the safety net of a stable husband at home, the relationship had lost its appeal for both of them. Michelle had called Charles 17 times the night Daniel broke up with her. Charles had listened to none of the voicemails. The divorce was surprisingly simple once everything came out. Michelle's company had fired her after confirming the expense fraud. She tried to fight it, but Charles's documentation was thorough, and her own calendar had been damning. Richard and Margaret had helped her with legal fees, but the settlement was fair. Charles kept his retirement accounts and some of their mutual investments. Michelle kept the house, but had to buy out his half of the equity. They split everything else down the middle. No kids, no complicated custody arrangements, just the clean end of a marriage that had been rotting from the inside for 8 months. Charles's attorney, Catherine, was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd seen every kind of divorce. She told Charles at their first meeting that his case was one of the clearest she'd handled. With this much evidence, she'd be stupid to fight. And from what you've told me, your wife isn't stupid, just selfish. Michelle's attorney, a younger man who looked uncomfortable through every meeting, had advised her to settle quickly. Take the fair division, accept the consequences of her choices, and move on. To Michelle's credit, she'd followed that advice. Hadn't tried to claim Charles was abusive or that she deserved more. Hadn't fought him on anything except one request. She'd asked to keep the wedding album. Charles had let her have it. He didn't need photographs to remember how it felt to believe in someone completely. Now, watching her sign the final papers, Charles felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even relief, just a quiet sense of completion. This chapter was ending. Whatever came next would be built on truth, on solid ground, on trust that was earned rather than blindly given. All done, Catherine said, collecting the papers. You're officially divorced. Congratulations, Charles. You're free. Michelle looked up at that word, free. Her eyes met his for the first time since they'd sat down. Can we talk? Just for a minute? Charles glanced at Catherine, who nodded. The attorneys left the room, giving them privacy neither of them deserved, but that Michelle apparently needed. I'm sorry, Michelle said when they were alone. I know I've said it 1,000 times. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know I understand what I did to you, how wrong it was, how much I hurt you. Okay, Charles kept his voice neutral. He wasn't here to absolve her guilt. Daniel and I didn't work out. I don't know if you heard. I heard. I thought I loved him, thought what we had was real, and that my feelings for you were just comfortable settling. I was so stupid. She wiped at her eyes. I lost everything, Charles. My marriage, my job, my self-respect. My parents barely talk to me. Sarah won't even answer my calls. All because I couldn't see what I had until it was gone. Michelle, Charles leaned forward slightly. I didn't walk into that dinner to punish you. I walked in because I needed you and your family to understand that I knew. That I wasn't going to disappear quietly and let everyone feel justified in lying to me. But your consequences after that, those aren't my fault. Those are yours. You made every single choice that led you here. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you still think the problem was getting caught. Not that you lied to me for 8 months. Not that you involved your entire family in deceiving someone who loved you. But that it all fell apart in a way you couldn't control. Michelle's face crumpled. That's not fair. What's not fair is what you did to our marriage. What's not fair is that I spent 3 years building a life with someone who was keeping me as a backup plan. What's not fair is that your family looked me in the eye over and over and smiled while they helped you betray me. Charles stood up. You want forgiveness? Work on forgiving yourself. I'm done carrying your guilt for you. Do you hate me? The question hung in the air. Charles considered it. Did he hate her? 3 months ago, maybe. In those first raw weeks when he was sleeping in hotels and trying to untangle their shared life. When he was fielding calls from mutual friends who couldn't believe sweet Michelle would do something so terrible. When he was lying awake at night, replaying every moment of their relationship, trying to figure out which parts had been real. No, he said finally, I don't hate you. I don't feel much of anything for you anymore. You're just someone I used to know, someone I thought I knew. Michelle nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I really did love you. Maybe not the way you deserved, maybe not enough, but I did. Maybe you did, in whatever way you were capable of. Charles walked to the door. I hope you figure out how to love someone better next time, how to be honest, how to be a partner instead of just taking what's convenient. Charles, wait, she stood up. The person who texted you, the anonymous number, did you ever find out who it was? He had, actually. About a month after the divorce was filed, the number had texted him one final time. Not with information this time, but with an identity. Daniel's ex-wife, Charlotte. She'd been divorced from Daniel for 2 years after discovering he'd cheated throughout their 8-year marriage. When she'd found out he was having another affair with a married woman, she decided enough was enough. Had hired a private investigator to document everything, then sent it all to Charles because she knew what it felt like to be the spouse who didn't know, who trusted completely while their partner betrayed them. Charles had called her. They'd met for coffee, talked for 3 hours about what it felt like to have your reality shattered, to learn that the person sleeping next to you every night was a stranger. Charlotte had told him it gets better, that eventually he'd trust again, love again, build something real with someone who deserved him. She'd given him the phone number for a good therapist, told him to be patient with himself, to let himself grieve. They'd become friends in an odd way. Two people bonded by betrayal, helping each other navigate the aftermath. Nothing romantic, just understanding. Charlotte had been 3 years past her divorce and was dating someone new, someone honest and kind who'd never given her a reason to doubt. It gave Charles hope that maybe someday he'd find that too. But Michelle didn't need to know any of that, didn't deserve to know who had exposed her or why. No, Charles lied. I never found out. Does it matter? I guess not. Michelle sat back down, small and defeated in the leather chair. Goodbye, Charles. Goodbye, Michelle. He walked out of the attorney's office into a bright February afternoon. Winter was ending, spring approaching, new beginnings, and all that metaphorical nonsense. But Charles felt it anyway, a lightness he hadn't experienced in months. The divorce was final, the papers were signed. He was officially single again, unburdened by a marriage that had been dead long before he knew it. His phone rang. Jake, his best friend, who'd been checking on him constantly since the separation. Charles answered. It's done, he said. I'm divorced. How do you feel? Charles thought about it, stood on the sidewalk in the sunshine, watching people walk past, living their lives, carrying their own secrets and struggles. I feel like myself again, like I can breathe. That's good, man. That's really good. Want to grab dinner tonight? Celebrate? Yeah, that sounds perfect. They made plans. Charles hung up and started walking to his car. He'd been living in a small apartment downtown for the past 3 months, a temporary place while he figured out what came next. He'd started seeing Charlotte's therapist, working through the betrayal and the trust issues and the anger, slowly rebuilding his sense of self that Michelle had undermined without him realizing it. Work had been a refuge. Charles had thrown himself into his projects, earned a promotion 2 weeks ago. His boss had told him he seemed sharper, more focused than he'd been in years. Charles hadn't explained why, hadn't told many people at work about the divorce. But crisis had clarified things. shown him what mattered, and he'd channeled that clarity into excellence. His parents had been supportive, angry on his behalf at first, then gentle as he'd processed everything. His brother had offered to fly out and help him move, to be there however Charles needed. His friends had rallied around him, offered couches and spare rooms and endless hours of listening. Charles had learned who his real family was, not the people bound by blood and obligation like Michelle's family had been, but the people who chose to show up when life got hard. At home that evening, after dinner with Jake and two other friends who'd known him before Michelle, Charles sat on his small balcony with a beer and looked out at the city lights. His phone buzzed, a text from Charlotte. "Thinking about you today. Hope the signing went okay. Proud of you for getting through this with grace." He smiled, texted back, "Thanks, couldn't have done it without your help." "You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Coffee this week?" "Definitely." Charles set down his phone and let himself feel it all. The grief and the relief and the hope. The pain of what he'd lost mixing with excitement about what he might find. He'd loved Michelle truly and completely, and she'd taken that love and treated it carelessly. But that didn't mean he'd been wrong to love. It meant she'd been wrong to accept love she couldn't honor. Somewhere across town, Michelle was probably in that house they'd shared, the one that would always feel like theirs even though it was just hers now. Maybe she was going through their old photos, mourning what she'd destroyed. Maybe she was already on dating apps, looking for the next person to give her the validation she craved. Charles didn't know and didn't need to. Her life was no longer his concern. His phone buzzed again, this time an unknown number. For a split second, his heart rate spiked, that old panic response. But it was just a spam text about car insurance. Charles deleted it and blocked the number. The next morning, Charles woke early and went for a run. Something he used to do before Michelle, that he'd stopped during the marriage because she preferred sleeping in and wanted him there when she woke up. Small accommodations that had added up over 3 years until he'd lost parts of himself he hadn't realized were missing. Now, running through the park as the sun rose, Charles felt pieces clicking back into place. His body remembered this rhythm. His mind cleared in a way it hadn't in years. He pushed harder, ran farther than he'd planned. When he got home, sweaty and exhausted, and more alive than he'd felt in months, he looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. The man looking back wasn't the same one who'd received those text messages 4 months ago. This man was leaner, harder somehow. Not physically, though he had been working out more, but emotionally. Tempered by betrayal but not broken by it. Wary but not closed off. Older in ways that had nothing to do with time. At work Monday morning, Charles ran into Jennifer, a colleague he'd always gotten along with. She was recently divorced too, about a year out, and they'd bonded over that shared experience in the break room a few times. "Hey," she said, pouring coffee. "I heard your divorce finalized. How are you doing?" "Better than I expected. Different than I expected." "Yeah, it's weird, right? This feeling of being untethered but also free. Like you could do anything now that you're not carrying someone else's expectations." "Exactly that," Charles smiled. "You doing anything this weekend? A group of us are going hiking Saturday morning if you want to join." Jennifer's eyes lit up. "I'd love that. Text me the details." It wasn't a date. Charles wasn't ready for that yet, and didn't want to use someone else's interest to bandage his wounds the way Michelle had used his stability as a safety net. But it was connection, friendship, the possibility of something more someday when he was ready, when he'd healed enough to trust again. Saturday's hike was exactly what Charles needed. 6 friends trekking through mountain trails, laughing and talking and being present in a way that felt revolutionary after years of Michelle's half-attention. Her mind always partly somewhere else. He knew now where else. But even before Daniel's return, she'd never been fully there. Jennifer kept pace beside him, and they talked about work, hobbies, dreams for the future. Nothing heavy, nothing forced. Just 2 people getting to know each other without the weight of expectation. At the summit, standing in the sunshine with his friends around him, Charles took a photo. Not for social media, or to prove anything, just for himself. Evidence that he'd made it through the hardest thing he'd experienced and found himself on the other side, still standing, still capable of joy. That night, alone in his apartment, Charles opened a blank document on his laptop, started writing about the experience, about betrayal and recovery, and the strange journey of rebuilding trust in yourself after someone shows you that your judgment was catastrophically wrong. He'd never been much of a writer, but the words poured out. 3 pages, 5, 10. When he finally stopped, it was past midnight, and he'd written something raw and honest and probably too personal to ever share. But it felt good, like exercising the last pieces of pain that had been lodged in his chest for months. He saved the document, titled it simply, After, and closed his computer. 6 months after the divorce, Charles moved into a new place, a condo he bought for himself, modern and clean with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in light. No memories of Michelle in any room, no ghosts of the life they'd built, just space for whatever came next. He furnished it slowly, deliberately, bought a couch because he liked it, not because it matched some vision of what a couple's apartment should look like. Hung art that spoke to him, set up his office exactly how he wanted it, created a home that was entirely his, that felt like him in a way his and Michelle's house never quite had. Charlotte came over for the housewarming party. So did Jake and Jennifer and a dozen other friends. They drank wine and ate too much food and celebrated Charles's new beginning properly. Jennifer stayed late helping him clean up, and they talked on his balcony until 2 in the morning about everything and nothing. When she left, she kissed his cheek and told him she was glad he was in her life. Charles closed the door behind her and leaned against it, smiling. He wasn't ready yet, but someday soon, maybe. A year after the divorce, Charles ran into Michelle at a mutual friend's wedding. He'd known she'd be there and had prepared himself, but seeing her still sent a jolt through his system. She was with someone new, a man Charles didn't recognize. She looked happy, or at least she looked like she was trying to look happy. They made eye contact across the reception. Michelle raised her glass slightly in acknowledgement. Charles nodded back. They didn't approach each other, didn't force a conversation for the sake of showing everyone they were mature and over it. They just existed in the same space for a few hours, and then went their separate ways. Jennifer, who'd become his girlfriend 3 months earlier, after careful, slow progression from friends to something more, squeezed his hand. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm good." And he was. Michelle was part of his past, a painful chapter that had taught him hard lessons about trust and self-worth, and the importance of choosing partners who honor what you give them. But she wasn't his present, wasn't his future, just someone he used to know. Charles danced with Jennifer, celebrated their friend's wedding, drove home to his condo, and the life he'd built from the ashes of his marriage. And he felt grateful. Not for the betrayal, he'd never be grateful for that, but for the strength he'd found in surviving it, for the friends who'd held him up, for the second chances and new beginnings, for the person he'd become through the process of putting himself back together. Late that night, lying in bed with Jennifer asleep beside him, Charles's phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. "Saw on social media that you're at the same wedding as Michelle, checking in on you." He smiled, texted back, "I'm good. Really good, actually. Thank you for checking." That's what friends are for. Coffee next week? Absolutely. Charles set down his phone and looked at Jennifer, at this woman who'd been patient with his healing, who'd earned his trust slowly and carefully, who'd never given him a reason to doubt her honesty. He thought about Michelle and Daniel and all the lies that had built and finally collapsed under their own weight. Thought about the anonymous text that had shattered his reality and forced him to see the truth. He'd hated that text at first, hated knowing. Part of him had wished he could have stayed in ignorant bliss, believing in his marriage until Michelle finally decided to be honest. But now, a year later, Charles was grateful. grateful to whoever had cared enough to tell him the truth, grateful for the pain that had forced him to rebuild stronger, grateful for the life he had now, built on authenticity instead of comfortable lies. Outside, the city lights glittered. Inside, Charles was warm and safe and loved by someone who chose him every day with clarity and intention. His marriage to Michelle was over, but his life, his real life, the one he'd created from honesty and hard work and the support of people who truly cared, that life was just beginning. And Charles realized, lying there in the quiet dark, that he was happy, genuinely, deeply happy, in a way he wasn't sure he'd ever been during his marriage. This was what love was supposed to feel like: secure, honest, reciprocal. Not perfect, nothing ever was, but real. And real, he'd learned the hard way, was worth more than any comfortable performance could ever be. He closed his eyes and slept peacefully, no longer haunted by what he'd lost, but embraced by what he'd found. The story of his marriage with Michelle was over, but Charles's story, that was still being written. And for the first time in over a year, he was genuinely excited to see what the next chapter would bring. This story isn't just about betrayal and divorce. It's about the fundamental values that make or break relationships, the courage it takes to face painful truths, and the resilience of the human spirit when everything falls apart. Let's explore the deeper lessons we can learn from Charles's journey and Michelle's choices. Trust is sacred, not stupid. Charles trusted Michelle completely, and when everything came crashing down, he questioned whether that trust made him foolish. But here's the truth. Trusting someone isn't naive when you're in a committed relationship. Rest is the foundation of love. It's supposed to be there. The problem wasn't that Charles trusted too much. The problem was that Michelle wasn't worthy of that trust. When you love someone, you should be able to trust them without constantly looking over your shoulder. If you can't, you're not in a healthy relationship. You're in a prison of anxiety. Charles's willingness to trust completely wasn't his weakness. Michelle's betrayal of that trust was hers. Honesty is love's most basic requirement. Michelle claims she loved Charles even while lying to him daily for 8 months. But love without honesty isn't love at all. It's manipulation dressed up in affectionate words. Real love requires truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. If Michelle had truly loved Charles, she would have been honest when her feelings changed. She would have said, "I reconnected with my ex and I have feelings for him. We need to talk about our marriage." That conversation would have been painful, but it would have been respectful. Instead, she chose comfort over courage, and in doing so, she chose herself over him in the cruelest way possible. The lesson here is clear. If you can't be honest with your partner, you don't love them enough to be with them. Your partner's family should protect your relationship, not undermine it. One of the most devastating aspects of this story is Michelle's family's complicity. When you marry someone, their family should become your family. They should support your relationship, defend it, strengthen it. Richard, Margaret, and Sarah did the opposite. They helped Michelle lie. They smiled in Charles's face while knowing he was being betrayed. They turned family dinners into performances where Charles was the only one who didn't know his role. This is a profound violation of what family should be. If your family is helping you deceive your spouse, they're not protecting you. They're enabling your worst impulses and guaranteeing that when the truth comes out, the damage will be catastrophic. Good families tell you hard truths. They hold you accountable. They don't help you destroy your own life. Being someone's safety net isn't love. Michelle kept Charles as a backup plan. She liked the stability he provided, the comfortable life, the respectability of marriage. But she didn't love him the way he deserved. She loved what he gave her, not who he was. This is one of the most painful forms of being used. When someone keeps you around not because they genuinely want you, but because you're convenient. You're the safety net while they chase what excites them. Charles deserves someone who chose him first, who was excited to come home to him, who didn't need another man to feel alive. If you're with someone who treats you like a backup plan, you're not in a relationship. You're being used, and you deserve so much better than that. Comfortable lies eventually become unbearable truths. Michelle thought she could manage both relationships indefinitely. She believed she could keep Charles stable and comfortable while maintaining her exciting affair with Daniel. She thought the lies were manageable, that as long as no one found out, no one was getting hurt. But lies have weight, they accumulate, they require more lies to support them. Eventually, the whole structure collapses, and when it does, the damage is far worse than if she'd been honest from the beginning. One difficult conversation a year earlier could have saved Charles months of deception and humiliation. But Michelle chose comfort over courage, and everyone paid the price. The lesson? Temporary comfort from avoiding hard conversations always costs more in the long run than immediate honesty. You can't control how people treat you, only how you respond. Charles couldn't control Michelle's choices. He couldn't make her faithful or honest. He couldn't force her family to respect him. But he could control his response. And his response was powerful. He gathered evidence. He maintained his dignity. He confronted them on his terms. He didn't beg or plead or try to win Michelle back. He recognized that someone who could betray him so thoroughly wasn't someone he wanted to be married to, no matter how much it hurt. This is a crucial lesson. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Charles refused to tolerate betrayal. He walked away with his self-respect intact, and that decision, as painful as it was, saved him from years more of being disrespected. Healing isn't linear, but it's possible. Charles didn't wake up one day completely over the betrayal. His healing took time. He had bad days. He questioned himself. He worked with a therapist. He leaned on friends. He slowly rebuilt his sense of self and his ability to trust. But he did heal. He found happiness again. He opened himself up to love with Jennifer, carefully and intentionally. The lesson here is that betrayal doesn't have to define you forever. You can survive it. You can grow from it. You can become stronger and wiser and more careful about who you give your heart to. But you have to do the work. You have to feel the pain instead of avoiding it. You have to let yourself grieve what you lost before you can fully embrace what comes next. Real love chooses you daily. The contrast between Michelle and Jennifer is instructive. Michelle chose Charles once, on their wedding day, and then stopped choosing him every day after. She chose comfort. She chose excitement with someone else. She chose lies and convenience and what felt good in the moment. Jennifer, on the other hand, chose Charles carefully and then kept choosing him. She earned his trust slowly. She was patient with his healing. She was honest and present and intentional. That's what real love looks like. It's not just the big romantic gesture or the wedding vows. It's the daily choice to be honest, to be present, to honor the person you're with. Michelle taught Charles what love isn't. Jennifer showed him what love could be. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to value you. Perhaps the most important lesson in this story is this. Michelle's betrayal said everything about her and nothing about Charles's worth. He wasn't unlovable because she cheated. He wasn't inadequate because she wanted someone else. He was a good man who loved honestly and completely, and he deserved the same in return. Her inability to appreciate what she had was her failure, not his. Too many people internalize their partner's betrayal, believing it means something is wrong with them. But the truth is, good people get betrayed by selfish people all the time. It doesn't mean you're not enough. It means you were with someone who wasn't capable of recognizing and honoring what you offered. Charles learned this lesson, and it freed him to build a life where he was truly valued.